We're going to call this one Dow's is probably a better way to pronounce that. Dow's First Quest by Jay Wilburn. This is a story that I've written for the older of my two sons. Neither of them are in school right now. They're doing homeschool. And so they're not doing the Valentine's parties and things like that. And we're trying to keep the family safe. And of course, with my kidney transplant and me being on suppressives, the medication that keeps me from rejecting my kidneys, my new kidney, I can't catch COVID. There's just no way that would go well for me. So the rest of the family, they have to be safe too, but it's primarily for me that we need to be as careful as we are. And so I know that like my wife and my kids are missing out on some things that other families may be participating in. And so to kind of thank them for the sacrifices they've made, I wrote a story for each of them, for my wife, for my older son, and then my younger son, for Valentine's Day. And so this is the one for my older son. I kind of made it into a fantasy story. It's about 1,900 words long. If he likes it, I may write a second quest for this Dow character and maybe a third, and we'll just see anything to get the kids reading. I also wrote one for the younger boy that's about him fighting a fart monster. So that's kind of the range of work that I've been creating this week. But Dow's First Quest. Dal knew something bad was happening to him, but he didn't understand it. He was changing. He didn't know what he was becoming, but he was becoming something different. He hid in the dark in the lowest basement below the armory. All right, below the armory. The armory connected to the castle of the king of Valahark. The castle was part of the high palace in the center of the capital city, where Dal was a squire. He first noticed changes in his nails. They grew faster, but that was no big deal. They were hard to cut. Clipping his fingernails got to be like cutting stone, his toenails too. That was a bit of a problem. Then they grew sharp, not just along the edge like a blade, but his nails grew into points like claws. He started having to use the whetstones, the ones used for sharpening swords, to file down his claws. That was a big deal. His breath started to stink. It wasn't great before, but it was rotten now. Dal started chewing herbs to cover up the stink. If it bothered him, it would probably really offend the other squires. After his eyes turned yellow, Dal snuck up to get his meals, but then made an excuse to take them back to the basement. "Where are you off to, lad?" one of the teachers sitting down for breakfast would ask. "I'm behind on sharpening the swords," Dal would answer, staring at the floor so no one would see his strange eyes. "Well, be quick about it," the teacher said with a cross tone. "The knights can't defend the kingdom with dull swords, can they? Finish the job before you return to lessons." Dal would usually take a couple baths after breakfast. He was starting to smell like a dirty dog, but he didn't stay clean for very long. He would bring back his breakfast plate at lunch and try to sneak away with his food again. "Why aren't you eating in here?" one of the other squires called at his back. "I'm being punished for missing lessons," Dal said as he slipped away. None of the other squires ever came down to check on him. Dal was glad for that, but kind of sad too. He wasn't great at making friends even before the yellow eyes and the stink. He dropped off his lunch plate and slipped away with his dinner. People stopped asking him where he was going and why. When his eyes started glowing in the dark, he stopped going up for meals. He waited until night and snuck up to take food from the pantries, usually enough for a few days. Dal never took more than he would be fed if he had taken his meals with the other squires. He didn't know why he was changing, but he was no thief. Then the hair started growing. Hair wasn't the right word for it. It was fur. When he was done filing his claws each day, he gave himself a haircut and a shave. Soon it was growing too fast to keep up. Dal wore long sleeves, long pants, and boots. He just shaved the fur off his face, neck, and hands as best he could. The knights visited the armory regularly. They had to. Dal closed all the windows to keep the knights from seeing him clearly in the sunlight. He lit enough torches so they wouldn't notice his eyes glowing, but not enough that they could see him well. Dal would sharpen swords or sweep the floors the whole time they were there. When there was nothing left to sweep, he sharpened axes and spears or scrubbed the floors. When there was nothing left to scrub, he sharpened knives and daggers or repaired loose stones and boards. "Why is it so dark in here, boy?" one knight would say as he checked the new edge on his sword. "Moisture damages the weapons. I was ordered to keep the windows closed." The next knight would drop off his sword for sharpening and say, "It smells in here. How do you stay in here all day, lad?" Dahl would not look up from the dagger he was sharpening for the third time. "Working in here is a small thing compared to what you brave knights do." "Well, that is a good attitude, squire, but it smells like a wet dog in here." The smoke from the torches covered some of the smell, but not all of it. He started airing out the armory at night as best he could. As time went on, the conversations changed. Dahl's voice had taken on a sound that was too much like a growl. He used as few words as possible, and he usually whispered them or coughed in the middle of his sentences. "My blade has never had a keener edge. Keep up the good work." The knight tossed Dahl a copper coin. That actually might do better as the end of that dialogue there, so we know the knight's talking. "The place is spotless, and the weapons are the best kept in the kingdom." The next knight flipped him 2 copper coins. "I don't want any other squire working on my sword, only you." This knight put down a silver piece. "This is a coin from the kingdom of Solstyr. Nice etchings on it, and it spins just as well as any Valahark silver. I want you to have it. Your sharpening skills saved me in the last battle. Have one of the doctors check out that cough. We don't want to lose you." Dahl, he only has 1 L in his name, let's be consistent. Dahl gathered quite a collection of coins over time. When the shape of Dahl's body changed, he knew he needed to leave the palace. He gathered extra food that night and left some of his copper coins to pay for it. As he packed the food and his few belongings, he looked over the weapons neatly put away. He did not touch the ones belonging to the knights, but he picked up one of the extra short swords he had finished sharpening that day, even though no one had used it. Dahl belted the short sword to his side and left the silver coin and the rest of his coppers, more than enough to pay for the blade. "I won't hurt anyone," Dahl growled to himself. "Not if I can help it. I'll just scare them away if I am seen." Just seeing him might do the trick. The fur was already growing back around his face, and he didn't have time to file down his claws. If anyone saw him sneaking through the city, they would sound the alarm, and he would be hunted for the monster he was. Dahl left the basement and walked through the palace grounds to the gate. Of course, the gates were guarded. He crouched down in the grass and waited. When the guards turned their backs a moment, he ran as fast as he could. He was running on all fours. He slipped out the gate and down the road before the men turned around again. Dahl slipped. Did I use the word sneak? No, he already used slipped. Dahl sneaked. Do you sneak or do you snuck? Dahl sneaked from one doorway to another through the quiet streets of the city. When he was sure no one was there, he would run from one shadow to the next. Finally, he reached the eastern gate to the city. The gate was closed. Dahl looked around and up the wall. When he, I already said was sure, when he determined no one was around, he grabbed the edges of the stones with his claws and started to climb. He thought it would take a long time, but he scampered up the top of the wall like it was nothing. Dahl took a deep breath and smelled someone coming. He smelled that they were afraid. "Who are you? What are you doing up here?" Dahl didn't know what else to do, so he jumped. He expected to break his bones when he landed, but he pounced on the ground, let's say outside the walls to be clear. Outside the walls. Oh, here we are, we got an update. I literally had the sneak snuck issue today. I decided against snuck, although not wrong, it looks odd. I've had editors take away a snuck from me from time to time, so I'll stick with sneaked on this, and for now it's just my son being the editor or the critic. All right. He pounced on the outside of the walls and started running away from the city very easily. Arrows hit the ground around him, so he ran faster and dodged from side to side. I'll say shifted, because I'm going to use dodged again later. And shifted from side to side. He ran through the night. Dahl dodged around trees, leapt over streams, and bounded over hills. As the sun started to rise, he laid down in the grass on top of a hill and panted for breath. When he lifted his head, he saw his parents' home. Dahl had not thought about where he was going when the night started. He just ran. He had crossed a large portion, let's say portion instead of part. Large portion. He crossed a large portion of the kingdom and now looked down on the place where he grew up in the east of Valahark before his parents sent him to become a squire. All right, I can't go to them. Not like this, he growled to himself. They wouldn't understand. They couldn't. He might put them in danger if others saw them with a monster. He didn't know what he was becoming. Maybe he would hurt them without meaning to. Dahl had heard legends of monsters living beyond the eastern border of the kingdom. If he hurried, he could get past the house before his parents started their chores for the day. It would take a few more days, but at the pace he could run now, he could leave Valahark behind forever in another couple days. Did I use couple a few times? No. Dahl cried. He cried until it sounded like a howl. The howling noise made him even sadder. Then he got angry. He felt himself getting out of control, but he couldn't help it. He had never been so frustrated in all his life. This was unfair. He had done nothing to bring these changes on himself. Life was better before all this happened. Before all this started to happen. Okay. I need to say goodbye, he said to himself. His voice almost sounded normal for a moment, like it did back when he was human. He almost started crying again, but fought it off. If I don't say goodbye, they'll not know what happened to me. Dahl expected them to scream in fear the moment they opened the door, but he wanted them to know why he was never coming home again. It was hard to make a fist with his claw and furry paw, but he figured it out and knocked. The bolt slid away inside, and Dahl braced himself for screams as the door swung open. 2 wolves with glowing yellow eyes stood on their hind legs in his parents' cottage. Dahl reached for his sword, but then stopped. He smelled his parents. He didn't know how he knew it was them. He didn't know how it could be them, but it was them. It's us. Don't pull your sword, the wolf that was his mother said. Dahl had already taken his paw away from the hilt of the weapon. What's happening to me? What is this? You're becoming your true self, his father said. The old wolf had gray fur around his snout and pointy ears. Come inside. We'll try to explain everything. Dahl was more confused than he had ever been. I said his entire life before. I'll just cut that out this time. Than he had ever been. But he accepted their invitation. He didn't understand what he was becoming or what his parents were, but it felt good to be home. It felt good to be accepted and not treated like a monster. He had thought he was never going to be welcomed home again, and that would have been the worst change of all. He needed to sleep, but he needed answers first. All right, so my son hasn't seen that yet. That's going to be his Valentine's Day present. So I hope he enjoys it. I think it's up his alley. He likes fantasy stuff, and it's kind of written on a middle grades level. He's actually beginning high school and can read a lot higher level than this, but I think this is a nice easy read for him that he'll enjoy.